Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's episode of Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys coming by the channel and checking today's video out. And guys, today I want to have a reality check, and I want to talk about what happens to professional bass anglers that have been fishing professionally for decades. What happens to them after they retire? Because it's really sad for the most part, and I think this information needs to get out there in terms of if somebody is trying to make a decision if they want to be a professional angler, or maybe they're in it right now. I'm sort of going to let you guys know what you have to expect for the most part, and it's a bad deal. It's a bad deal that needs to be talked about, so we're going to get into that in today's episode. Also, guys, before we get started, just a quick invite. SolarBat has extended the sale on my Signature Series glasses till the end of the month here, the Father's Day sale. If you get a pair by the end of June, you can get them at 30% off, and any purchase over $98, you get a free pair of SolarBat safety glasses with that. So I'll put the SolarBat link in the description, and you can also get them at Tackle Warehouse. I'll put that Tackle Warehouse link in the description too, so really appreciate that. Okay guys, I am completely qualified to talk about this because I've been there, done that, been part of this whole conversation, what I'm talking about, and that is what happens to most professional bass anglers after they retire or quit fishing. I'm going to sort of lay this out a little bit. First of all, professional bass fishing, there's no safety nets as far as like retirements or pensions or any type of post-retirement financial subsidies that you're going to get. I mean, most occupations and most jobs, you know, you pay into retirement, you've got benefits, you've got some insurance, sometimes you got a 401k, you got some type of a safety net that will allow you to, you know, pay your bills and continue living after you retire. That's not the way it is in professional fishing. What happens in professional fishing is that it's so expensive that nobody, unless you're, now I'm setting aside all the independently wealthy dudes out there, which there's getting to be more and more of them that enter professional fishing, but the average person that gets into professional fishing and pays their dues and works hard and doesn't have a rich family and doesn't have, you know, some type of a, you know, golden toilet they sit on, or they don't own a business, this is what happens to most people, because these tournament entry fees and the expenses that it costs are absolutely ridiculous. So when somebody makes a $10,000 check, say at a Bass Pro event or an NPFL event or whatever, you got to realize that if they get a $10,000 check, about $8,000 to $9,000 of that is in expenses for the tournament by the time you pay your entry fees and expenses. So when you guys look at a tournament result and you see some guy get 20th or 30th place, say he wins $10,000, he's actually only winning about $1,000. And then if you go for 2 or 3 tournaments without getting a check, you have dug yourself such a hole financially that the only way you can get out of it is to win the tournament. Now, here's what's happened before. It's like back when I was at the top of my game, from about the mid-90s to the mid-2000s, the payouts were a lot lower. The entry fees were a lot lower, and the payouts were a lot higher, and there was a lot more opportunities for sponsorships. So you could actually get ahead a little bit, and you could invest your money, and you could make some savings. But now the entry fees are so high, the payouts suck, the payouts are worse than they've ever been, and it's next to impossible for a professional angler to get sponsorships because there's so many pros out there. Guys, it is a terrible, I'm talking a terrible business decision to be a professional angler, especially after you retire. Because here's what happens, and even this is even true today for people that have been in the sport for 30 or 40 years. Once you retire as a professional bass angler, unless you have got some other income stream, you're going to be struggling in a big way, because the only thing that you're going to have is your retirement. You're not going to have a pension, you're not going to have a 401k. Most people, as they fish throughout their careers, they're not making enough money to invest anything. The average bass angler out there, they're getting by tournament to tournament. They're living paycheck to paycheck from a tournament, and there's no discretionary income. By the time, even if you're a successful pro, by the time that you pay all your tournament expenses, and then you got a mortgage, you got a house payment, you got insurance, you got to buy food to your family. There's nothing left over to invest whatsoever. So most of these pro anglers that I know, once they retire, or most of them just don't like retire, they gradually exit the sport, they're hurting financially. And guys, there is a ton of well-known bass fishing pros today that you think that they should be set from how good they've done in fishing, that are basically just broke right now. That is the reality of the situation, and that's one thing that you really need to consider if you're deciding to want to be a pro angler, or you know somebody that wants to be a pro angler, or if you're just a casual observer of the sport. Yeah, this is what you have to look forward to, because again, the sad thing about this sport is the fact that we have created an environment here where only the wealthy people can fish anymore. It's getting to be like that. Now, the only exception to that is if you don't have a girlfriend, you don't have a wife, you don't have any kids, you live, in your parents' basement, and you work in between the tournaments, you can actually be a professional angler. But it requires those financial sacrifices that quite simply most people aren't willing to do. Here's the change that we've had in it. Back when I was starting out, in my 20s, we would get 3 or 4 guys together at a tournament, and we would buy the cheapest rat-infested motel room, or get a room in the cheapest ratty motel room, and we'd all be sleeping on the floor. And that way it cost us like $5 or $10 a night, to stay at a hotel. Guys, now these dudes out there, these 20-year-old kids, they're staying at the Holiday Inn Express and the Hampton Inn, getting in their brand new Ford F-250, 3/4 ton pickup and $100,000 bass boat, and they're 20 years old. That is what I'm talking about, how this sport has transformed into an elitist sport for the most part. Now, there are exceptions to the rule, but by far, this has become a rich kid sport. And Bassmaster and MLF, they don't help out any with that, because, like I said, it's almost impossible to get good non-endemic sponsors anymore. Payouts suck. That's where we've evolved to that point of the sport. So there are no safety nets if you retire as a professional angler. The only people that are safe are the people that are independently wealthy, and they don't have to worry about money, because make no mistake about it, guys, there's a lot of them out there, and the people like myself and the other people out there that have had to work their butt off and scrimp and save and stay in rat-infested motels, they're getting weeded out simply because they can't do it. So I just want to encourage everybody to think long and hard before you get into the sport of professional fishing, because once you get to be 50, 60 years old, unless you have some other way to make a living after you retire, you're going to be hurting in a big way. And like I said, that's the reality of the situation. There's a lot of different reasons how it's been created like that, but I don't think this gets spoken about enough. I think this is something that it's sort of one of those dark areas of bass fishing that people don't talk about. And the people that have a vested interest in the sport, they don't want to talk about it because that discourages participation. But guys, I have seen it, and I know guys right now, I know pros, I know famous, well-known pros right now that you would think should be set, that are freaking broke because they have spent all their money on entry fees and expenses and travel in the country, and they have not built any type of a nest egg. So think long and hard before you decide you want to do this, because guys, it's not for everybody, and it is a tough way to make a living. And like I said, I hate to see it, but this sport has transformed into a rich person sport, and we've talked about this a lot. There's a lot of different reasons for that, but that's just the reality of the situation. So, guys, let me know what y'all think about it. We'll talk later.